Welcome back to another episode of Hospitality Unpacked. Thanks for joining in today. Today we have a very special guest, Matthew Merlino. How are you doing today, Matt?
Fantastic. Amazing. How are you, sir?
I'm doing really well. Let's kind of just start by how did you get into the cocktail industry and the hospitality industry as a whole, and what were like the starting parts of your career?
I was a young man. I was not much older than you are now, sir. And I was a writer, and I was looking for a job that would help me to work as few hours as possible for as much money as possible. And as I'm scanning the kind of skyline of possible jobs to degenerate 20-something-year-old that I was, the hospitality industry looked pretty good. I'd been in healthcare for a long time, working in emergency rooms, kind of like an EMT kind of tech. Um, but I sat at a bar one time, and there was a rich older guy sitting next to me, and we got quite drunk together. And he told me that these bartenders there make probably more than he does, and probably make more than most doctors do. And I said, that sounds pretty good because these guys are pretty cool, right? They're hanging out, they're having a good time. People seem to like them, and they're being paid well. I was like, I have to figure this out. So I started out. No one would hire me as a bartender, of course, because I had no skills. The closest thing I could find was working at a cafe. I was living in Seattle at the time, so I became a barista. Which this is a very long time ago, but this is when upscale coffee was kind of taking over. So you had a lot of new spots popping up. Latte art was like becoming a thing. And so it was like taken fairly seriously. So I did that for a couple of years. I was lucky enough to work at a cafe next to a very busy restaurant. So the servers would come to me hungover before their shifts for coffee. And then I slowly started telling all of them, I was ingratiating myself to them. I wanted them to like me. I was like, hey, how is it over there? Do you like working there? How's the money? I'm looking maybe to get a job. So after kind of weaseling my way into friendships with all these hungover servers and bartenders, they finally hired me to be a busser and a bar back. And then after a year, I got.
Very, very funny story and good beginnings. Once you kind of got behind the bar, what were there any like mentors or things like that that helped guide you into becoming more into bartending and things like that?
Absolutely. Real, real swashbuckling, wild characters that kind of took me by the ear and from very different walks of life, which is what's beautiful about hospitality. So there's this gentleman, this guy Jay, who used to manage back in Minnesota, where he was from. He was managing like fine dining establishments. He was like running steakhouses. Something happened. He ended up in prison. He got out. He ended up in Seattle. Now he's running this bar. He took me under his wing. This man was something like a drill sergeant. So he was on me. He was watching my every move and would take every chance he could to call me out in front of I mean, it didn't matter how many people were around. He would scream my name from the other side of the restaurant if I wasn't doing the right thing. I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I wasn't refilling the ice fast enough. And he would say, you need to just, I need you to know when you need to refill my ice. I need you to know when I'm low on things. And in my head, I'm like, this guy's insane. How am I supposed to just know when he needs something without him asking me, right? This is all very new to me. So, it was me dealing with him, kind of taking him under his wing in exchange for getting pretty harsh treatment. Which is a little bit how hospitality is, especially in a busy place, and especially back then. I think now there's a premium on service, so there's a lot of support. If you were a bartender in that restaurant, it was a busy restaurant on First Avenue. You were the only one until nighttime, so you had to deal with the lunch rush by yourself. You had no one to help you. You had to take orders. You had a 40-seat bar area, and you had to make drinks for the entire restaurant. So I didn't understand the stress that he was under, but I was going to find out very shortly. That restaurant also had a new general manager. Now, this gentleman, Luciano, was as Italian as it gets. He was Super Mario. He was Luigi. He was Wario all wrapped in one. He was straight from Sicily, and he had a foul mouth, impeccable style, and a crazy temper. So he also came from fine dining. Dining. This restaurant, however, was not fine dining. It was fast fusion sushi. So another trend that was happening at the time was all these crazy sushi rolls you see now that have like packed with stuff, fish on top, crazy sauces. That was starting in Seattle. I don't know if that's where it came from, but this is the only place you go to get that stuff at the time. Still there, super busy restaurant. So it was not uncommon for him to uh, get into an argument with the servers if they were doing a poor job. One time, food came out, rolls on a busy night. They looked like shit. He threw the plate at the wall, full dining room, shattered against the wall, sushi's flying everywhere. He's screaming at servers. So, these are pretty serious hospitality lifers from the old school. You don't really see that kind of behavior nowadays. You don't see the crazy militaristic training, and you don't see the kind of explosive personalities in the same way that you used to. You see a lot more run of the mill, especially with chefs. Um, but he was a genius at sales. He was a master smoozer, the most charming man you ever met in your entire life. He was as Italian as it gets, and he gave me all these little hints. And you're not a waiter, you're a server. You don't stand around waiting. You go table side. They want you to take them by the hand. They want you to reach in their pocket and take their money out for them. They want you to help them pay you more money. Between those two guys, I really got my A and my B side from bartending to service, um, in a couple of years that I was there training with them.
After that beginning part of your career, what was like the next move for you and like the next steps, and then to eventually starting the Paperplane Cocktail Club?
It was a pretty long journey going from that starting point to starting my own business, like over 10 years. I'd say, to condense it really, I like cut my teeth at that Japanese restaurant bartending, and then I immediately started working at craft cocktail bars, super busy craft cocktail bars, managing bars, and creating bar programs. So literally my fourth year in the industry, I was managing a bar. And then I basically was either managing or running bar programs in restaurants for the 10 years after that. And just learning, along the way as you do. I didn't really feel good staying at the level of bartending. I have a natural tendency to take on like more responsibility and also open my mouth when I don't like things. And what ends up happening when you complain is you realize that if you want things to change, you need to just figure out how to make it better, right? So I ended up talking my way into a lot of management roles that way, whether I liked it or not, before starting the company.
And then if you could kind of take us into like what you do at Paperplane Cocktail Club and your biggest lessons you learned when starting it, and like thoughts about on that.
What? It's a great question. What do I actually do at Cocktail Club? I mean, you know, the business is about throwing parties and putting bars in parties and craft cocktail experiences, in places where they don't normally exist. So I get to take what would be a normal run-of-the-mill catering bar and give you craft cocktails that, I mean, if you wanted an old fashioned, you would get the exact same old fashioned that's not unlike what they would serve at Death and Co. or at another like classic New York craft cocktail bar. So bringing that level of kind of quality to one-off events, and taking it out of the hands of catering companies, which do a great job focusing on food. Running a bar is really a separate skill, and it's also a separate. It requires a different staff. It requires different experience, and I think that a lot of times caterers see their bars as a little bit more of an afterthought, and they pare it down. And so I'm just here providing people with an option if they want to do something that's more at the level of what we expect now when we expect to drink a cocktail, especially with the way things cost, especially with how catering costs. Lessons I've learned: don't overthink anything, really. I mean, I really started this business thinking it's going to be a side project or like a fun, maybe I'll get a couple gigs here or there. And I was managing a restaurant at the time in East Hampton, and I was like, maybe I'll take some evening gigs on weekends. And I ended up quitting that restaurant job like 6 weeks after I started the business because I was fully booked with private events. So really just providing value to people, kind of the same values that you should have if you want a successful bar or restaurant, I'm just putting into this business. Give people service, give people magic, hospitality, like make people feel transported. And it's as simple as showing up, looking the part, treating people with respect and hospitality, and giving them more than they ask for, like as much as you can. Always, 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 always giving people more than they think they're going to get.
That's really cool, and especially hearing how fast you were able to kind of determine that the business was going to be able to like sustain you so quickly is really impressive. This is kind of like a side question, but where'd you get the name Paperplane from?
Yeah, so um, I've started businesses before, and before I moved from Seattle to New York, I was running a small recording studio called Lightwave. And really, like my ethic and my idea around just designing a brand or a business is to keep it very simple and relatable, and something that's like basically words that everyone knows. Nothing, shouldn't sound like some new medication commercial on TV. Shouldn't sound like anything that's something that people haven't heard before. It should be so simple a child could to basically look at it and kind of understand what's going on. So my idea was to center the business around a cocktail and name the business that. I chose a paper plane because I think it represents really like the heart and soul of what I'm trying to do, which is the paper plane is a modern classic. It was created by Sam Ross. He was kind of an OG at Milk and Honey in New York, which is the bar that really started the craft cocktail renaissance that we're all experiencing and continue to experience. That's why everywhere you go has like 10 cocktails on their menu. That never used to be, it was only cocktail bars. Now everyone wants cocktails on their menus. So I just thought it was cool. I knew that I could make a cool logo that was like simple and kind of catchy and easy to traffic as far as like visuals, like on business cards. I knew it would travel well, websites, what have you. Um, yeah, I just thought it was like simple, cool, and it represented a cocktail that I think is generally enjoyable by everyone. It's complex and it's modern, which is kind of what I was hoping the business would be.
Yeah, definitely. And hearing your other business thoughts and advice was really cool as well. Could you maybe go into a little bit more into some of your other entrepreneurial ventures and some of the biggest lessons and takeaways you've learned from that?
Yeah, I was I ran I got to I had a group of friends back when I was more of a full-time music producer. I've always like worked in creative fields and tried to do my own thing. I was a writer at one point, like I said, and then I just got together with a bunch of friends, and I just decided like we should try and do this full time. And so we started like a little record label production house. Didn't really know what it was going to be, and that taught me how to network. That taught me how to get out into the world and like instead of being, just a guy behind a bar, like you have to go out into the world and like shoot your shot, go meet people, make, make connections and ask people, scary questions like, do you want to work together? I don't have any money. Would you be interested in doing this with me? Like, do you like this thing that I made? I think getting out in the world and being vulnerable is a huge lesson. I think also learning how to work with very different personalities. When you're working in creative field, you get a lot of weirdos. It's kind of the same thing with hospitality. The bar to entry is very low. Anyone can walk into a restaurant and get some kind of a job. And if you end up being a hard worker and somewhat competent, you'll probably rise through the ranks, after some time, right? You end up getting all these kind of cool, colorful personalities and weirdos that don't fit in anywhere else in society. or they're also creative on the side, especially in this city. You have actors and actresses and singers and playwrights and modern dancers, God bless them, whatever that is. And it's like, they find their way into the hospitality industry because they're smart and good looking and talented and they can like hack it and figure it out. So I really learned how to work with a bunch of creative weirdos at my studio, which taught me that I like working with teams and diverse people and diverse opinions and talents and all that kind of stuff. So that really helped me become a better restaurant manager and a business owner because it taught me that I like the challenge of figuring out how to take this complex problem, like a big event, and how to solve it with people power and like creative problem solving.
Definitely, yeah. And then taking what you kind of just said and going a little bit back to like the cocktail industry and like you setting up for an event and things like that. What are the like what do you think makes a cocktail great beyond the ingredients? Like what are some of the ways that you've been able to kind of include your creative side into like the menus you create and it's like the setups you do for events?
I think the one thing that's really helped me out in my career, especially as a bartender, someone who designs and like I like to make up cocktails and come up with new stuff, is to really make things as relatable as possible. I think now, especially, but definitely back when I started about 10 years ago, there was a huge move to make things like bartenders wanted to treat each new cocktails like this unique snowflake thumbprint like work of art. And so a lot of, you know, unique ingredients you couldn't find anywhere else. Maybe it's something started out as like a variation on an old fashioned, but then by the time it's done, it becomes completely unrecognizable to the average guest. I had some great mentors in Seattle at this restaurant stateside, and the chef there, worked John George restaurants for a very long time, and he wasn't a cocktail guy, but he came up with great cocktails. And the names for the cocktails were always just what the cocktail was. Like we had a whiskey sour that had passion fruit in it and was clarified, and it was on tap. It's a passion fruit sour. We had a rum drink and a coconut. That is a coconut cooler. Like, don't overcomplicate things. Like, just make it as relatable as possible. And another thing he told me was like, make hit songs. Like, you're making hit songs. What is a hit song? What's pop music? Like, it's something that's relatable. It's something anyone can understand very quickly and enjoy. Like, that's what you want from his perspective. His advice was if you're a chef, if you're coming up with new drinks for people, you want to make a hit, you want to make things as relatable as possible, but put your own spin on it. So I've really tried to stay away from, a bunch of crazy ingredients. I don't really like to talk to people about my processes because they're annoying and meticulous and like no one cares. It's just stuff that I do at home prepping, for the events. No one cares that I sous vide this thing for 2 hours. Who gives a shit? Like, is the drink good? That's all that matters. Like, that's all that matters. So that's what I try and focus on.
Definitely. And then are there any like current trends in the cocktail industry that are exciting you? Like things you've seen from like maybe other bartenders or things you started to include more in your menus and, events?
I mean, to be honest, that would require me to be out in the world drinking and absorbing like trends. Like, I don't really go out to drink and explore bars too much anymore, because I just am not a huge drinker at the moment. Um, what I'm seeing is, at least in New York City, I can't speak to the rest of the country, but I'm seeing a bit of a revival of kind of going back to these really complex, weird um, cocktails that um, have a lot of modern culinary techniques involved to make them. Everyone's clarifying all kinds of drinks and everything is like presentation focused. I don't necessarily think any of that's a bad thing. It's just not my style. I think that there's something cool about, I've definitely seen an uptick in bars that are taking food items and extracting what makes like a Caesar salad good or fried chicken good and finding a way to put that into a drink. So I think that stuff's kind of cool. Not necessarily my style, but it's definitely making for popular bars and making for things that guests are talking about and people are excited about. And I think that's cool.
Definitely, very interesting stuff. You mentioned that you're not a you just said you're not a big drinker and stuff. Have you seen like like when you go to events and things are like non-alcoholic beverages and mocktails for guests like becoming more popular? Or is that something you do or deal with?
Yeah, in the last year, I've gotten, more than double the requests for mocktails and non-alcoholic cocktails at my events. So, I mean, that's a sector that's been growing a lot since 2020, 2021, like post-pandemic. But now it's really hitting, and it seems like a lot more people either are not drinking or are more comfortable saying they're not drinking. And then having an actual non-alcoholic cocktail available that's not just some kind of juice and soda is starting to become more of the standard. I've also taught now a number of NA cocktail classes, which is very cool. Um, so it's definitely exploding in popularity, and there's some cool products coming out that are the term in industry is functional, which is just a fancy way of saying, there's something in there that gets you a little buzz that's not alcohol. A lot of adaptogens, a lot of uppers, some downers, a lot of natural herbs, some black magic business. I don't really know what goes into these things, but it's cool. It's cool to see what's coming out and what the possible alternatives might be for alcohol in the future.
Definitely, yeah. And like on this topic of new trends and stuff, but then also going back to like the guests you serve, like is there how like what is like the most well how would you define like hospitality behind the bar? Like what are the main things that people who are trying to get into bartending or just going into the industry or maybe starting a new venture of some sorts, like what are the main philosophies that you have when you're behind the bar and the staff that you may hire for your events and things like that?
Great question. I'm not the first bartender to say it, but I think that bears repeating that anyone can learn how to make a great cocktail. It's not super complicated. Maybe not everyone could, learn every bar technique or how to come up with their own cocktails, but you can teach people how to make drinks. Some people just have an essence about them that adds a real vibe or energy to a room that's a little bit hard to quantify. Um, and I think that some people develop that over time as well through a lot of experience and a lot of hard work and a lot of long nights. But there's just something about certain people that I look for in that they have a natural ease about them, a natural warmth about them towards other people that when someone comes up to the bar who's a total stranger, maybe they're nervous or they don't know what to say and they don't know how to, they're not in hospitality. A lot of people don't know how to relate to each other in this life. So sometimes you have these magical people who can get one sentence from some stranger, just their drink order or a look that they're given or like how they're wearing their clothes or whatever. Read them very quickly and say something to make them laugh, put them at ease, make them smile, and ease them into the experience of transitioning from wherever they came from to wherever they are now. So I don't know exactly how to teach that aside from just trying to do that as much as possible, like in my own work. But I really look for people who have that about them and who can um, make life easier for other people. It's really a beautiful gift that goes often overlooked in hospitality and in general.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, everyone always says now like soft skills and learning by doing is the most important thing, especially now with AI and stuff. And now AI might not relate a lot to bartending things, but have you seen things or read things or things with artificial intelligence that excite you in the upcoming future with bartending?
I'll say that I'm excited for the service industry to have more value. I think what we're going to see is AI take a lot of fake jobs away. I think there's a lot of people who sit in front of data for 8 hours a day and sit in front of spreadsheets, moving things around and auditing and maximizing and optimizing. I think those are things that computers will probably start to phase out in the next decade. Um, there's a concrete value to human interaction that I don't see AI replacing anytime soon. I think it's a good resource for bartenders, um, the same way Google is. I don't think it's actually much better at this point as far as referencing things. But it's a study tool for bartenders. I think it's good in that way. If you're a bar manager, you can put a request into, Chat GPT to help you build an Excel spreadsheet that will make your expensing easier. But I think the actual experience of bartending hospitality is going to become more valuable as um, people move away from work that can be done by a computer chip, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've in school and stuff, we were always learning about AI and the ways that it's going to affect the future, and it people are definitely going to still want and cherish like the human interaction that comes with all aspects of the hospitality industry. Um, how would you say that some of like the guest experiences that you've dealt with in the past years have helped shape your future interactions with guests, as well as like things you may have noticed have changed in your time in the industry?
Man, I'll tell you the most instructive interaction I ever had was it was my first bar manager job. I was in a rough part of downtown Seattle. It was like, just a rough part. It's literally Skid Row. Where the name came from was that part of Seattle, Pioneer Square, quite a long time ago. It's not uncommon for bartenders and people who work in hospitality to drink on the job. This night, I was definitely drinking on the job. I was bartending, I was alone. It was a busy Friday night, but we were almost done. We were close to closing, and this guy comes in, and he's just kind of a rabble rouser. He just looks like he's got like scoundrel energy. You ever just see someone, you're like, you're just up to no good over there. I don't know what it is, but you're gonna cause problems. And he seemed to make friends with the people that were hanging around, and everyone was drunk and having a good time. And he just came up and he was fairly rude. And I, because I'd been drinking, I didn't interact with him like he was a customer. I interacted with him like I was a guest at the bar and he was just a dude talking to me. So I started to be a smartass because I don't like his attitude. And at one point, he orders a drink after going on and on about where he's traveled to and where he's coming from. And I'm like, okay, it's great. He ordered a Fernet and Coke, which if you go into a bar and you order a Fernet, like I go to order a Fernet or an Amaro, call that, that was a classic bartender's handshake because Fernet tastes like toothpaste and only other bartenders would drink it. You get a shot of Fernet. I did not know that I believe in Argentina where he had been, they drink Fernet on ice with Coke, like a rum and Coke. I'd never heard of that. We didn't do that in Seattle. So I give him a shot of Fernet and a bottle of Coke. And he's like, "What is this?" He's angry right away because I already pissed him off. So it's not going to take much. Now he thinks I'm messing with him. Now he thinks I'm like, make your own drink. In my head, I don't know what he's asking for. But I have a bad rapport, so there's no way to find out. Anyways, I'm like, I gave you what you asked for. You wanted Fernet and Coke. He's like, gets angry at me. And I'm like, all right, dude, I'm not serving you. You're just like, your attitude's bad. I pull the drinks away. I'm like, you should just take off. There is probably about 20 totally full bottles of water that our servers use to pour tableside water. And he just says, you know what? Gets in front of them and just like pushes them at me so they all go flying. Glass breaks. I get cuts all over my hands so I go to shield myself because I'm on the other side of all this glass. I chase him out of the restaurant. He runs away. I still have the scar on my hand from that glass where it cut my finger. So I learned two valuable things that night. One, don't drink on the job because it's going to take you away from your responsibilities and your focus. And two, de-escalate situations. If I would have been treating him like a guest and not like some dude who I didn't particularly care for, I wouldn't have taken anything he had to say personally. I would have been de-escalating a situation because I knew he was getting annoyed with me. I liked that. I was enjoying that his annoyance, but I was setting myself up for embarrassment and pain because now I have to clean up all this glass. I'm bleeding, and now I have to, and then after I do all that, I have to close a bar by myself. So it was a wake up call for sure, and how to move forward as a professional in the industry.
Yeah, I mean that was a crazy, crazy story. I don't think many people could have similar stories. Maybe they do, but this is kind of more of like a fun question. What has like been the strangest thing you've ever like seen put into a cocktail, or if you've personally like made into a cocktail?
I think the strangest thing I've ever seen put into a cocktail is mayonnaise, um, which I think is just insane. But I think it was like some Instagram business. They were doing like an elote street corn thing, and there was mayonnaise involved. I don't know. That's the craziest thing I've seen put into a drink. It kind of makes sense, but probably not. The craziest thing I put into a drink is probably fish sauce. Fish sauce is um, a divisive ingredient, to say the least, in any food cuisine. It's fishy, super umami. It's a very specific, comes from very specific cuisines, Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Thailand, whatnot. But I was trying to make something like a dirty martini with fish sauce that had a bit of like a Vietnamese like flair to it. I couldn't get it to work. It just tasted like weird and salty, and like I could probably drink it because I'm a maniac, but the average person would be like, absolutely not. Like, what are you trying to do to me? Yeah. So I probably won't be doing that again.
When you're like crafting and creating drinks, do you look a lot into like the base of the drink and like who made the drink, as like you kind of mentioned a lot, like creating simple things and making sure the guest knows what the drink is and not getting overly, fancy with it. So it's like learning like the history behind the drinks you make like an important part in your process.
I think for me, 'cause I like history. Yeah. And I think a lot of bartenders we end up getting wrapped up in history trying to become better bartenders because all of these cocktails have historical flashpoints. Um, Things are very different pre-prohibition versus post-prohibition in this country with the drinking cultures, right? Um, and the way spirits tasted back then. And if you go to just figure out the history of the gin and tonic, you're going to get a whole lesson on British imperialism and the Royal Navy, and it's hard to separate the two after a while. So I like to have things grounded in history, and a lot of really amazing cocktails obviously were born in New York City, so it makes it easy bartending here to kind of talk and speak to that history, which I like quite a bit. Um, and guests like it. I think especially when I'm teaching cocktail classes or when I have a little more downtime and people want to chat about things, people are curious. And then when you start connecting history to present day, I think people realize they're a lot more interested in the past and in stories when their own experience is involved too. So it's a cool way to connect with people for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it interesting when you can connect like historical elements to like current things that are going on. This is kind of like my last question for you. Do you have any advice for aspiring bartenders or mixologists and people in general who want to go into the hospitality industry?
Do I have any advice? That is such a good question. Well, I can only say what I think helped me, which is to find mentors. Like, definitely find people who are better than you and latch on to them and figure out what makes them better and how they got where they are. There's a curiosity about people that makes them better at things. You could train five people and you're going to have one person that does better and goes a little bit further with their efforts. I think there's a curiosity there. So I think find mentors, be curious, and definitely learn how to not take things personally. It's you know if you talk to people who are working in hospitality and they're complaining about their job, they're probably complaining about something a guest did that I would say 9 times out of 10 that person didn't mean anything by it or didn't mean anything personally towards them. We're messy. People are annoying. Our habits and the way we talk, um, we just don't get it right 100% of the time. So you have to allow for that. And if you take every little interaction to heart in hospitality, it's going to wear you down and make you bitter. And there's a lot of worn out, bitter people who get stuck in hospitality because they didn't find another exit. And also because they're bitter, they're not curious and they're not finding ways to grow. So find a mentor, stay curious, and don't take anything personally and just get better and get out when it's time to get out. If you start hating your job, get out. I guarantee you, no matter how much money you think you're making in serving or bartending or whatever, there are other professions you can go do. Just go. You don't have to feel stuck.
Thank you for that. That was very inspiring and interesting. With that, I think we can end the episode here. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Matt, for joining me today. Make sure to subscribe and like the video below and follow us for more. See you next time.
Cheers. Cheers, my brother.
Cheers.